Welcome to Inkology. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be doing a fun little illustration and talk about character development. So if you have a pen and paper, grab it and sit down and let's doodle and draw. First off, let me apologize for not posting a video last Saturday. I got too busy, and this is the video that I was supposed to post. And if you're new to the channel, please don't forget to like and subscribe as I put out videos every week of mythological characters and events and draw just some fun stuff. But let's begin. Now with my mechanical pencil, which is a 2H Lyra, I am going to be putting in the pose and just kind of building out the structure of my hero, which is actually an anti-hero. So here's the story. If you've ever played any video games where you have to do any dungeon crawling, or maybe an infinite dungeon where there's always a new enemy or new level or floor that you have to go to, and it's just more enemies you have to fight. And usually they offer weapons and prizes and treasures in the game for battling all those enemies. Well, in this concept, I was thinking, well, the NPC, the non-player computer enemies that you do battle, what's their story? And I know in one of the games I played, there was a skeleton characters. There's a lot of skeleton characters that have swords and fight. I was like, what if one of those skeleton characters realized he wanted out of the dungeon? He didn't want to be in the dungeon no more. He wanted to live his skeletal life, free. But he noticed that all the actual players of the game would come in with these cool swords and weapons and beat all his friends, and he, do all these things, but they kept on coming. So what happens when he realizes, what if he could leave the dungeon the way they came in? And so all the fallen soldiers and knights and people that were players that fell in the game, he picks up their swords and their weapons, and he battles his own people in the dungeon to try to find his way out, as well as other players, which is an idea I thought was really cool because it has the anti-hero aspect to it. You're not going to be rooting for the skeletal knight that's trying to kill the main player, but now you are, because you're like, oh, he's pretty cool. He's got a conscience, and he's trying to get out, and he's collecting all these legendary swords as he's going and becoming stronger. And I wanted him to have this Ghost Rider feel to him, the fire on the face and his body. He's just flaming because he's just enraged. Also, he's a monster character. But yeah, that's where I was going with this. And when I'm inking, the inking part of it was particularly kind of difficult because I was thinking about, okay, well, I want to have the smoke, but I want it to be white. But then also his face, I want to detail, but then I couldn't add detail if it's on fire, right? Because light and fire usually requires more negative space, more white space instead of detailed. Now you can make it work, but you'd have to have it contrast the background pretty well, in which I wasn't going to do. Because I have the background being all black since he's in a dungeon. When building a character, you all the time, almost nearly all the time, you're going to have the character in your mind first. He isn't going to really appear on the page unless you're writing, and then sometimes the character develops as you write. There is a way actually though to do the same thing for drawing, to let the character develop as you draw. And we call that doodling, right? Sometimes we get cool characters when we doodle. But when you're trying to actually create a character, there's a few things that I have found that help develop the character easier and kind of promote something to finish. And that's having items on the character, having a backstory to why the character's wearing this or carrying that. And that's important to building the character's entire world. And if you're like me, you just like to draw. You don't really want to think about the characters. You just want to draw and then add items as you go and have something cool looking whenever it's done. I think a lot of my fellow artist friends love that vibe, that feeling, because it feels good to have a drawing just come out of nothing and look fantastic. But what happens is that sometimes, me specifically, I will get started with a drawing and then leave it because it doesn't feel engaging enough. There's nothing more to draw, or maybe I'm stuck on some pieces, or maybe I don't like the way the angle is. And a lot of that can be resolved through items. Take, for example, the swords. If I took away all the swords that are behind him and the one that he's holding, the character's just a skeleton knight walking around, the dungeon looking mindless. If he wasn't on fire and didn't have all this smoke, I would be forced to fill in the rest of the page with, well, other things. And I think the smoke gives enough detail for a negative space to give the character this representation of where he's at, as well as what kind of strength he is. You want to make sure to build the story out, right? A little bit, not too much, because you want to leave room to grow. For example, I mentioned he took all the swords from all these fallen players that play the game or other characters. Well, I made each sword different, so you would know that he had fought multiple different types of characters and enemies and took their swords and won. This is going to help fill the page as well as build the character's uniqueness, right? Because now he's like, oh wow, how strong is he? Did he get lucky? But he's only a skeleton, but then he's on fire. What is he holding in his left hand? It looks like a bird. Yeah, these little items that you throw in there create a really dynamic story for your character, but also give you a lot of things to draw. That fills the page, and that will build out a larger and more thorough world for your character if you ever need to use them again. Textures and details like this metal armor that I do and the chainmail kind of tell the viewer what the character's been through. For example, his armor is not that beat up. It's actually very shiny, but that's because he's been stealing the armor from all these characters. And his outfit isn't fully torn because he's just upgrading. And that's kind of what the story is. It's about this character who was nothing, who's just supposed to be beaten in the game, becomes an upgraded main character because, you know, he's picking up items and he's making his own story. Now that feels more fleshed out than a character that just has no swords, he's walking around skeleton, maybe he's on fire too, but then there's nothing to it. For example, why is his face on fire? Why is he a skeleton? Is it a Ghost Rider thing going on or what? Well, it's actually because he was a skeleton, and each time he kept on getting swords, each sword had power to it, and all those powers combined kind of started reviving his life. So the fire is the beginning stages of his flesh coming back and becoming an actual human. Now that's pretty rad. A great place to start with asking questions about your character to get development is, who are they, right? I usually begin with whether or not they're male or female, boy or girl, alien, kind of character or not. First things first, who are they, right? Secondly, where have they been? Where are they coming from? That right there should give you a lot of details to add on to the character, because they probably lived in that time period or coming from a battle or something of that nature. And the third question is, where are they going? These three questions, I think, should fill in enough details for your character, and almost any character, to have a fully fleshed out art page or character for a story. Another helpful hint is that if you don't have a story and you don't have the capacity to think of a story for the character, start drawing little lines around the character randomly and fill in those lines later on when you get to them with an item or a pose or something. That way you're filling in the drawing with creativity rather than just nothing, just plainness. I filled in the background with bricks and stuff to just fill in the page, and this is another way. Just make the background very close or far away to where you don't have to do too much detail and bring out the character, unless you want to do the background. And people love doing the background, so I get it. It's really fun to live in a character's life and kind of act like them and feel like what they're feeling and kind of role play. A little LARPing isn't that bad, especially if you're going to draw out the character. But if you like that, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. That definitely helped me out. Share the videos and join the Discord. We have all different types of artists that share their work, and we just talk and chat and, helpful tips and tricks. And this is my character, Koats, with a K, Knight of 1,000 Swords. He travels through the dungeons looking for enemies or players to defeat, to take their swords and become more powerful so that he can become flesh again and become real and leave this dungeon of infinite torture and battles. With his raven and sword in hand, Sir Koats travels endlessly through the dungeons, battling his way to freedom. And maybe that's his story. Does he ever reach the end? Or where did he come from? An anti-hero worthy of a comic book. My name is Josh, and this is Inktology.